Hi there everyone, welcome back to Dandelion Delphi Tutorials. Today we're going to have a look at the supplementary paper 2018 question 1. So this supplementary paper of 2018 was the last time that we saw a 3-question paper. As from the final of 2018 it was only 4 questions. But these are great to practice because they have longer questions. So question 1 is over 50 marks. And still exactly what you could expect in your final papers as from 2018 onwards. So this question is asking you to calculate the surface area of the picture that you see on your form. Press pause and try it yourself. Here is an example of what you can enter to get the output below. So when the question is asking you to extract values entered by the user, that means that you have to store the input as variables. Make sure you do that because there could be marks allocated for this. And then they also gave you the formula to calculate the area of a circle, and take note that the area of the triangle is only for one of the triangles. Here we have the input from the user, and make sure that you store these values as real variables, since the screenshot indicated that real values will be entered. So we're going to use the radius here to calculate the surface area of the circle. And remember, you have pi, the function that contains more or less the value of pi. The reason I say that it is only a value more or less like pi is because the true value of pi has an infinite number of decimal places, and it's not possible for your computer to hold infinite numbers. And then we had to calculate the area of a triangle, and this part here is just calculate the area of one triangle, but there were 8, so I had to multiply that by 8, and then I just add up the two areas together to get the total area to be displayed. Now if you look at the screenshot, you'll see many decimal places shown there. What they've used is they've actually only used float to string. But if you wanted to use float to string F, there's a few things that would be different from what we usually do. We usually put 10 here, and 10 is the maximum number of numbers, including your decimal points and your decimal numbers. So if you look at the output here, there are 13 numbers here, so I've just made it 15, and then I have 9 decimal values showing. Here we're showing 4, and here we're only showing 2. So that's the reason why I didn't use my normal 10 there, because it won't display my value correctly. So I'm using 15 to make space for all those decimal values. And for my triangles, I showed 4 decimal places, and very important, as the question asked, your total area only had to display 2 decimal places. Now try question 1.2. Press pause and try it yourself. There are many ways of getting the right answer as it is on the screenshot at the moment, but the correct method would be to use a conditional loop. If you are running this program before the year or on the year 2020, you'll get the output as below. But any year after that, it would be now 3 years further on, which would mean 2024 until the year 2024. It will then jump to 2027. The first blue moon was seen in 1862, and that was displayed in the label, and you had to extract that year from the label using pos and copy. So here is the label displaying for us the first blue moon, and I need to find that colon and then copy out the year. And this is what I'm doing in here. I am storing the input from the label. Remember, it has a .caption property. I am finding the colon, and then I'm copying out from the character after the colon for 4 characters to copy out the year. And I'm going to use a repeat loop to continue to add 3 to this variable, my integer variable of the first year, until that value is greater than the year it is today. I've just used current year at the moment, but you could also use year of the date. And then I simply display my integer value in my edit box. This is question 1.3. Press pause. I'll show you the output soon for the numbers entered for 12 and 15. So that would be 3. This is something that is mentioned in the exam guidelines of 2018, where we have to be able to find the highest common factor or lowest common multiple of two numbers. So here's my memo for this question, but I have included 2 examples of how to produce this output. So we're getting the number for the input from the user. I'm going to take 6 and 12 now as an example, just to explain to you why I did this here. So we know that the highest common factor of 6 and 12 is 6. So the highest common factor can't be higher than the lowest number. And that's why I'm using min here. I am determining which one of the two numbers are the lowest, and then I'm adding 1 to it. So this will, in this example, k would be 6 plus 1, and that will give me 7. I am using the plus 1 because inside of my repeat loop, I am deducting 1 from my k every time. So the first time that this condition is executed, k will now be 6. And very important is that you are testing both numbers, and I'm using mod to determine the remainder. So I'm taking number 1, dividing it by 6, and if the remainder is 0, then this condition will be true. I am also doing the same for 12 and determining if I'm dividing 12 by 6 and the remainder is 0, then this condition will be true. So for this example of input, this repeat loop will execute only once because 6 mod 6 is 0 as well as 12 mod 6 is 0. And then the 6 will be displayed here in my edit box. My k is going to be my highest common factor. If you take an example of, for example, 6 and 13, I'm still going to start with k as 7, and then it will be decreased, and our first test will be with 6. So even though 6 mod 6 would be 0, 13 mod 6 or any other number up to 1 will always be false. So your until's condition or your repeats condition will stay false until k is 1, and then you'll display 1 as the highest common factor. Now we can have a look at using a while loop. My input and determining the lowest number plus 1 is still going to stay the same, but very important when you have a while loop is that you have one variable that you initialize above the while loop, test in the while heading, and then change on the inside of the while. If you don't do this, you're going to fall in an infinite loop, or your while loop might not execute at all. So I am using bfound to initialize, test, while this bfound stays false, continue to loop, and then I will change it if I have found the highest common factor. So I'm decreasing my k. Then the first time this will be tested is when k is 6, and I'm testing if both numbers divided by my k gives a remainder of 0. If that is true, I'm changing bfound to true to make my loop stop. So when I find the highest common factor, I will then be able to display k, and that will contain my highest common factor. This question paper was full of loops, and here is a string handling question for you. Press pause and try 1.4 yourself. If we just have a quick look at the exam guidelines, you'll see that we have to be able to find the lowest common multiple as well as the highest common factor, which is the same as greater common divisor. And then you'll also see that for general string manipulation, we need to be able to find words. So that is all used in this paper. So we are expected to remove all the vowels from the sentence unless it is the first letter of a word. Now, to determine if we are at the first letter of a word, the character before that letter would be a space. So that's why I'm looping through my sentence and I'm testing if the character before the character I'm at the moment is a space. If it is a space, I'll just add the character. If it's not a space, I'll go to this if statement here and test if it's not a vowel. If it's not a vowel, I'll then add this character to the sentence. Now let's just recap on how to use our in and our not operator. First of all, I want to remove all the vowels that are both capitals and lowercase letters. And that is why I'm using uppercase around this character is sentence square bracket K, is to temporarily make this character a capital letter so that I can just list the capital letters of the vowels in my square brackets instead of listing both capitals and lowercase, which is going to take me much longer. Remember, the in operator can only use char data types. So if you would use uppercase, you are changing the data type of this character into a string, and then it won't be compatible anymore with my in operator. Your in operator can only use ordinal values, which is integers and chars. In this case, we're using our char data type. Now, to determine if it is not a vowel, I have to add the not in the front, and then after a not always comes these brackets, and inside the bracket I place the condition that should not be true. So this is really testing if it's not a vowel and then adding that character to the sentence. Now you will see I didn't start with an empty string here. And the reason for that is the first character of every sentence will have to be added, since the first letter of a word will always be added regardless of whether it is a vowel or not. And before this first word, there won't be a space. So that is why I initialized S new as the first character of my sentence, and then I looped from 2 onwards. If you use this method and you started at the first character, the example of input started with an S, so you'll see the S twice. It's also important to test your program with starting your sentence with a vowel. If you only use the space travel sentence that was given, it would work without this line even if you had an empty string, because this character here is not a vowel. In other words, the first character will be added even though there's no space before it. So quickly test your program and add a vowel at the front and make sure that it is added in your output. And then right at the end here, I'm just displaying S new in my edit box. Now you might have used a different solution. Just be very careful if you are using a for loop. Inside of the for loop, you may not make a change to a sentence. In other words, you couldn't use your delete. If you would use delete and you have 2 vowels after each other, you will skip over them. Let's just take the example of having the word through there and pretend that it was the start of my sentence. If I would use delete, as I will find the O and then I delete the sentence. So this was now when the K was 4. So that value is now gone. And if I loop again, K is changing to 5. So without this U becomes 4 and K jumps to 5. So I will not be removing the U. So here is question 1.5. Just read the introduction and see what it's about, and then I'll show you what to do next. Here you need to read very carefully as what is expected of you. Press pause and try it yourself. I'll show you the output just now. Here are some examples of input and output, but what I'd like you to do is after you have entered all these values, including the 50 below, I want you to add another value of 20. Now when it displays, it should then show group number 3. That is very important because you were not supposed to add the 50 people, so you should not have counted them as a group number that is attending the show because there wasn't space for the whole group. And then when you loop again and you enter then another value of 19, your loop should then stop. And your output should look like this now. This question actually asked you to put the input of the user inside of a loop. So it should have been a conditional loop. If you haven't done so, change your code and try again. Before we start with the processing, let's just go over tab stops quickly. So what I usually do is I write this line with my heading first, and I count the number of #9s that I want to use. And that would be my tab count. So I'm setting my tab count to 1, since there's only one #9 here in my heading. And then I need to set the tab spacing, or where it needs to stop, for tab 0. Remember, computer starts counting at 0, so we have to put tab 0 there. And since this is quite a lengthy value entered there, I'm setting my tab as 100. If it was just number or group, it would be possible to maybe set it to a lower number like 50. Now, always important is if you are setting tab stops and you need a dot clear, as in this question, that you first have the clear and then you have your tab stop settings, or else you're clearing your tab stops as well. I need to have two variables here, both integers. One is counting my number of groups, so that would be my I count, and my I total is keeping track of the total number of people that have been accepted as groups. Remember to take note of given code. There was a constant there declared called I seats available, so there would be marks allocated for using that value. My while loop here is testing if this total is still less than 100, the constant given there, and then I'm getting input from the user for how many people is in a group. And I just used the first example of input that was 27 there in my default value. There's no marks for this, but this just speeds up my processing. So first what I want to do is I want to test if there's space for this group. So this is my current total, and if I add the new group, is it still less or equal to the spaces available? I can go up to 100, but I can't go over 100. And this here is just my running total, adding the people of the new group to the total that I have at the moment. And you'll see I've placed here ITC for you as in the explanation before. When I'm using a while loop, I have to make sure I initialize, test, and change the same variable. Important is that you increment your counter only inside of this if, else you are going to increment the counter for groups that are not allowed in because of their size. So I'm only counting the groups that will be allowed in. And then I'm displaying that counter and the number of people. Now, if there wasn't space for this group, in my else here, I have to calculate how many seats are left. So I'm taking my constant and I'm deducting from that my current total. And that would be how many spaces are left. And that is what I'm displaying here in my show message. Remember to use the #10 to create that enter. So this will continue to loop, and the moment that I have filled my seats, in other words they were 100, which was the available space, then I total won't be less than the seats available anymore, because 100 is not less than 100, and that will make this while loop stop. You could also make use of a repeat until loop, and then we will continue to loop until the total is equal to the seats available. In other words, 100 is equal to 100. The inside of the code still looks the same. So this is the end of the February-March 2018 paper, and this whole question was worth 54 marks with lots of loops in it. Thank you for watching Dandelion Delphi tutorials, and if you are looking for more explanations on string handling and loops, please have a look at my book 1. Hope to see you soon!